My topic today is nation, nationality and the partition of India. Let me read at the outset from the epilogue of Azad's book, India Wins Freedom. No one can hope that East and West Pakistan will compose all their differences and form one nation. From this point, we may proceed. Well, the concept of the nation is something which is not very old. In the past, people perhaps did not have any specific concept of the nation or the nationality. They lived in a territory, and in most of the cases they were ruled by a ruler, a king or an emperor, and they were happy. They perhaps did not have any national consciousness as such. And the emperor or the king very often expanded their territory through conquests, and then it became a bigger territory, and in the bigger territory different people from other parts, they came and lived. India is a different proposition, because India is such a land where we have marked geographical boundaries. The Himalayas in the north and the seas in the south, they definitely form specific territory for this subcontinent. But was there any feeling of oneness, any feeling or any sense of belonging among the people of the entire territory? If you go to the very dim past and think of Alexander's invasion, what happened? Alexander invaded the kingdom of Porus, and Porus had to fight alone. In fact, the neighboring kingdoms, they were indifferent onlookers, and some of them had already joined hands with Alexander, as the king of Ambhi did. So to think of a sense of belonging and a sense of oneness is perhaps something which is not valid, at least in ancient India. India saw many invasions from many parts, many people, many races, many tribes. They invaded India, they looted India, some of them stayed back, and most of them went back. And those who stayed back were assimilated in the body of India. the Shakas, the Huns, they came and they stayed. The Mongols came, Nadir Shah, Mahmud of Ghazni, and many others. They came and looted the country and went back. And then came the Khaljis, the Tughlaqs, the Lodis, and they ruled over India for certain periods of times, and finally came the Mughals. They stayed, they ruled for centuries until the British came as the new rulers of the land. So the Muslims have been living in India for several centuries. In fact, there is a mosque in South India which is almost as old as the religion is. So, to think of the Muslims as outsiders is to think of something ridiculous. For at least 1,000 years, they have been with us. Still, why was there a demand from among the Muslims, and especially from the Muslim League, to have a new country and a new nation? What may be the reasons? The reasons are many. Although the Muslims stayed with the majority community, Hindus, for several years, for several centuries, there was a difficulty, because Islam believes in monotheism. Although Hindus, the sacred texts of the Hindus state that God is one, ekam eva advityam. But the practicing religion of the Hindus show belief in polytheism. So monotheism and polytheism, perhaps the two communities felt a barrier between them. But this cannot be the reason. There were other reasons. The Muslims stayed here as rulers, and when the Mughal rule came to an end and the English came, very naturally they wanted to impose their language and their education, their systems on the colonized land. And there the Muslims were reluctant initially. They were reluctant to learn English language, because there was a belief that the language of the aliens would destroy the foundation of Islamic thoughts. And as Azad states here in the first chapter of the book, the Muslims in general studied Persian, Arabic, theology and certain other things. They were averse to English education. Perhaps the same reaction was there initially among the Hindus too. But the Hindu community was fortunate to have two great men, Ram Mohan Roy and Vidyasagar. And gradually Hindus were convinced to take Western education, learn English language, which helped them to get more jobs and which helped them to get greater economic prosperity than the Muslims. The Muslims perhaps started to suffer from a sense of inferiority. And there came perhaps the issue. From there came the issue of a separate country and a separate nation. In my previous lecture, I told that the Muslim League was formed in 1906, and initially the purpose of the Muslim League was to plead for better opportunities for the Muslims in terms of government jobs. And they had been suffering constantly from the thought that they were neglected. It was the duty of the larger community, the majority community, Hindus, to try to assure them that they were very much a part of the mainstream. But unfortunately, that was not done. I pointed out in the previous lecture that the Indian National Congress was established in 1885, but in its early stage there was virtually no Muslim representation, and that was a setback for the Muslims. And Maulana Azad has pointed out that the Hindu leadership could not rise above communal considerations, and therefore Muslim leaders were not getting their desirable honor and position. He has given us several instances. One instance was that in Bihar, well, after the provincial autonomy was provided by the British in Bihar, when the Congress party was victorious in the election, the question of selecting the chief minister arose. But once again, it was seen that the Congress could not believe the most influential Muslim leader there. And well, the man who was to be the chief minister of Bihar, was thus neglected, and in place of him a Hindu leader was called, and the Hindu leader was groomed for the post of the chief minister. Now I read from the book, when the Congress secured an absolute majority, it was taken for granted that Dr. Syed Mahmood would be elected the leader and become the first chief minister of Bihar under provincial autonomy. Instead, Sri Krishna Sinha and Anugraha Narayan Sinha, who were members of the Central Assembly, were called back to Bihar and groomed for the chief ministership. Dr. Rajendra Prasad played the same role in Bihar as Sardar Patel did in Bombay. So, Sardar Patel and Dr. Rajendra Prasad did not, or rather could not, rise above narrowness, and they could not take up a secular point of view. Thus, the Muslims began to feel that they were neglected, and they had to do something to avoid this situation. The circumstances were congenial for leaders like Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Liaquat Ali, and they started pressing for a new land on the basis of religion, as if religion will be the foundation of the national consciousness for the new nation. Here I should read a few lines from Fanon. What Fanon says, let us see. National consciousness, indeed, instead of being the all-embracing crystallization of the hopes of the whole people, may in any case be an empty shell. So the national consciousness may prove to be an empty shell. The people should be very conscious about that. The people and the leaders should consider this, that what they think as the foundation of national consciousness finally may not prove to be so. And as Maulana Azad says here in this book, and I pointed out in my last lecture, that religion cannot be the basis of the national consciousness of any people. Well, if that be so, it will be a sorrowful day for the nation, for the people, for the country. National consciousness for the Hindus or for the Muslims should be founded on something else. But the Muslim League pressed that the Muslims in India should form a nation. The Hindu leaders were substantially responsible for that. The Hindu leaders could not assure the people, the common Muslim people, that they would be given equal share, equal opportunity, and equal share in the administration of the country. Maulana Azad points out that C.R. Dash of Bengal had the political, practical sense. C.R. Dash was practical in the political sense too. It was C.R. Dash who declared that the Muslims should be given 60% of jobs, and in the Calcutta Corporation the Muslims should be given 80% of the new jobs, because in Bengal the Muslims were a majority, and this system would go until and unless a parity between the Hindus and the Muslims in terms of jobs might be arrived. But unfortunately, C.R. Dash died a premature death, and the project that he took up could not be completed. But there is another thing that Azad points out. When C.R. Dash stated that he would go all out to assure the Muslims and give the Muslims their due, there were many Hindu leaders who vehemently protested and objected to his proposal. But C.R. Dash toured the entire province. He met the people, both the Muslims and the Hindus. He talked to them. He tried to explain to them what he wanted to do. And the people were convinced, both the Hindus and the Muslims, they were convinced. But it is a sad day. It was a sad day for Bengal and for India as a whole when C.R. Dash died a premature death. And the neglect of the Muslims continued. So this was one of the major and immediate reasons why Jinnah and Liaquat Ali could get an opportunity to press for a new land, a separate land for a different nation. The thing is, majority of the Muslims in India at least have been living here for not only centuries, for millenniums. The Muslims, majority of the Muslims in India do not have any Arabian lineage. They do not have any lineage with the Middle Eastern countries. They are converted Muslims. They converted themselves to Islam because of primarily three reasons. The first reason is that Islam was the religion of the ruler, and naturally the common men, many of the common people, they want to come closer to the rulers or the administrators of the country by taking up their religion. Secondly, many of them were impressed by the inner democracy that exists in Islam. Islam believes in equality, and that impressed many people who willingly embraced Islam. Forcible conversion was there in some cases, of course, but whatever may be the case, the Muslims are a very part of the land. They are sons of the soils, as the Hindus are, as the Sikhs are, as the Jains and Buddhists are. Therefore, pressing for a new country on the basis of religion was simply impractical, if not foolish. In my earlier lecture, I read from Azad, where he says categorically that religion cannot be the basis of a nation or a country. All the differences cannot be erased only by religion. He agrees that Islam definitely gave the people one great umbrella, and under that umbrella people could come and be one. But that lasted for only a few decades, or at least, or at best, a century. So after a century, it was seen that all the differences could not be composed, could not be erased by religion alone. And now I come to what Partho Chatterjee had said. Partho Chatterjee says that nationalism has three models. One is the Creole model, that is the American model. People from different countries and communities, they come, they assemble, and they have a common interest in their business, in their works for their uplift, etc., and they become one. The second is linguistic nationalism, one nation, one language. And the third is official nationalism, where nationalism is imposed from the top, as it was seen in Russia. Different states, different provinces were there with different cultural characteristics, but they were united into one by a political force, and that force was exerted to make those culturally different provinces or places or small states into one. So what was applied? What was applied in the formation of Pakistan? The Western Pakistan and the Eastern Pakistan, they were almost poles apart. And what Azad said wrote in 1957 was proved to be true within 14 years. The eastern part of Pakistan seceded from the Union and they formed a new state, Bangladesh. So only religion cannot hold a country together. In fact, perhaps what Benedict Anderson says should be remembered at this point, that nation is a politically imagined community. The formation of a country or the formation of a nation may have a political necessity. Now, it is very fine to say that the whole world is one country, but that is impractical. We cannot keep control over the entire world. So, for political necessity, we need perhaps smaller territories and have different countries. But more or less, it is a politically imagined community. Although Jawaharlal Nehru in his discovery of India has spoken of the spirit of India, but perhaps the more valid thing is we have to live together, we have to work together for our own needs, for our own prosperity, for our own safety, for our own security. But breaking a country and forming a new nation on the basis of religion alone cannot stand valid. And finally, perhaps, we can think of Rabindranath Tagore and his great poem, which most of the Indians know, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. And there he says, where the world is not broken into fragments, into narrow domestic walls. So this narrowness can be narrower and even narrower. Tagore's novel Gora shows the thing more clearly. Gora was a young man who was very proud of his Hinduism. He proudly propounded that he was a Hindu. He was a Hindu Brahmin, and he proudly propounded the superiority of his religion. But finally, it was discovered that Gora was not born of Indian parents. Gora's mother was an Irish lady. So Gora was not an Indian at all. And his pride was an imagined pride. Therefore, perhaps, well, what Azad said in 1957 can be a lesson to us. It should serve as a prophetic message to us that narrow divisions on the basis of religion cannot lead us anywhere. Because after all, let us agree, nation is a politically imagined community. We think of nation, we have to form nations because we live in a country, and we have to live together, we have to adjust, we have to compromise. But we must not be rigid about anything. The rigidity that was shown by the leaders of Muslim League did not benefit the Muslims in general. I pointed this out in my earlier lecture. Because had the country remained undivided, the Muslim population would have formed a substantial part of the population of undivided India, and the Muslim voice would have been stronger. And moreover, Jinnah did not consider that geography was against them. India could be partitioned only on the basis of the territories where Muslims were the majority. But what about the other parts of India where Muslims lived? And after the partition, what Jinnah did was a betrayal to the Muslims. He went back to Karachi. Before he was going back to Karachi, he told the Muslims to live here peacefully and be patriotic citizens. Many of the Muslims came to Azad and asked him what their predicament would be. And Azad said that he had warned them. He had warned them beforehand. So, finally, once again, I shall go back to Rabindranath Tagore and say a few words that he said. Nationalism is an organization of politics and commerce. When it becomes powerful at the cost of humanity, it is harmful for the humanity as a whole. So, yes, it is an organization of politics and commerce, but should it be more powerful than humanity as a whole? If it does, it will be a sad day for the human beings. Before I end, I want to remind students of an essay that Goldsmith had written years ago. The citizen of the world. Well, basically, human beings are citizens of the world. And Goldsmith points out there that he doesn't want to deem himself as a citizen of England. He's a citizen of the world. Now, this is a great saying, a great, well, judgment, but perhaps from a practical point of view, this is not valid. So we have to form our countries, we have to form our nations, but not on the basis of any narrow prejudice. Thank you very much.